In 2026, we are living through the Great Exhaustion. We have optimized our calendars, automated our homes, and integrated AI into every waking second of our existence, yet we have never felt more depleted. We treat burnout as a software glitch, something to be patched with a weekend retreat or a new productivity app. But the glitch isn't in our technology. It's in our disconnect from reality. The fundamental truth we ignore is this. While our software is futuristic, our hardware is ancient. Our brains, our nervous systems, and our emotional needs are virtually identical to those of the humans who walked the earth thousands of years ago. We are trying to navigate a world of light-speed algorithms using biological machinery designed for the rhythm of the seasons. Because of this gap, we find ourselves stuck in a cycle of temporary fixes. We chase dopamine hits to cure chronic sadness and seek hacks to solve deep-seated existential fatigue. But you cannot hack a soul that is out of alignment. The solutions we are desperately searching for aren't waiting for us in the next tech update. They were written in stone, papyrus, and oral tradition centuries ago. These are the 7 ancient rules for a better life. They aren't clever shortcuts. They are foundational laws of reality that the modern world has forgotten in its noisy pursuit of more. It is time to stop looking forward for a moment and start looking back. In the modern era, we treat death as a taboo, a design flaw in the human experience that we try to delay, ignore, or filter out of our social feeds. We live under the quiet delusion of someday. We tell ourselves we will start that passion project someday, reconcile with that family member someday, or finally prioritize our health someday. Ancient Roman Stoics saw this someday for what it truly is, a dangerous form of arrogance. Memento mori, or remember you will die, is the rule that turns the most terrifying fact of life into its greatest strength. The Stoics didn't carry this reminder to be morbid or depressing. They carried it to ensure they didn't waste the only currency they actually owned: time. The fundamental problem is that most of us live as if we have an infinite supply of time. This leads to 2 specific modern poisons: procrastination and anxiety. We procrastinate because we assume there is always a tomorrow, and we feel anxiety because we spend our today worrying about a future that may never arrive. We are constantly saving our best versions of ourselves for a retirement, a promotion, or a specific milestone, ignoring the fact that the present is the only place where life actually happens. By acknowledging your mortality daily, you undergo a profound psychological shift. You stop sweating the small stuff, the traffic jams, the rude comments, the minor inconveniences, because you realize they aren't worth the precious minutes of your limited lifespan. Simultaneously, you begin to live with a sense of urgent presence. To practice memento mori is to wake up and realize that today is not just another day, but a day you will never see again. It forces you to ask, if this were my final week, would I be spending it this way? The shift is simple but radical. Stop treating your life like a dress rehearsal. There is no perfect time coming. There is only the interval between now and the end. When you accept that the clock is always ticking, you don't become paralyzed. You become free. You become intentional with your love, your work, and your energy. You stop waiting for permission to live because you realize that time is not going to wait for you. In the hyper-competitive landscape of 2026, we are conditioned to believe that our happiness is a destination we haven't reached yet. We are taught to anchor our joy to a specific outcome, a certain number in a bank account, a specific job title, or the approval of a particular person. We live in a constant state of if-then logic. If I get the promotion, then I will be satisfied. If I buy that house, then I will feel secure. Ancient Indian philosophy, specifically within the Buddhist tradition, identifies this mindset as the primary source of human misery. This is the law of non-attachment. The rule is often misunderstood. Non-attachment doesn't mean being cold, indifferent, or lacking ambition. It isn't about not owning anything. It's about nothing owning you. The Buddha taught that suffering, dukkha, stems from tanha, the craving or clinging to things that are, by their very nature, impermanent. When we attach our identity and our peace of mind to an outcome, we become a slave to variables we cannot control. If the market crashes, if the relationship ends, or if the project fails, our entire sense of self collapses with it. The modern shift requires a radical revaluation of how we pursue our goals. Most of us are result-oriented. We work hard solely because we want the prize at the end. Non-attachment suggests a different path. Process orientation. You work with intensity, you show up with excellence, and you pursue your goals with vigor, but you let go of the need for the result to validate your existence. Think of it like playing a game. You play to win with everything you have, but your happiness isn't dictated by the scoreboard. By practicing non-attachment, you learn to enjoy things without owning them emotionally. You enjoy the luxury car while you have it, but you aren't devastated if it's gone. You love your partner deeply, but you don't cling to them as a means to complete your own soul. When you stop clinging, you actually become more effective. You no longer act out of desperation or fear of loss. You move with a quiet confidence, knowing that while you desire success, your internal worth is already secure. You're no longer a hostage to fortune. In our modern hustle culture, we're taught that the only way to achieve anything is through brute force. We wear our exhaustion like a badge of honor, believing that if we aren't grinding, we aren't growing. We treat life like a wall that needs to be broken down rather than a river that needs to be navigated. This constant friction is why, despite all our productivity tools, we feel like we're constantly running uphill. The ancient Chinese philosophy of Taoism offers a different way, Wu Wei. Often translated as non-doing or effortless action, Wu Wei is perhaps the most misunderstood concept in the modern world. It is not an argument for laziness or passivity. Rather, it is the art of aligning your effort with the natural flow of reality. Think of a sailor. They don't move the boat by blowing into the sails themselves. They position the sails to catch the wind that's already blowing. The rule of Wu Wei suggests that there is a natural rhythm to all things, a Tao or Wei. When we try to force life to happen through sheer willpower, we create unnecessary resistance. We stay in jobs that drain our souls, we try to fix people who don't want to change, and we push for results before the timing is right. This is the equivalent of swimming against the current. You might make some progress, but you will be exhausted by the time you reach your destination. The shift requires you to stop being a force and start being a flow. You must learn to identify where you are currently forcing a square peg into a round hole. This involves a high level of self-awareness and external observation. Are you pushing for a promotion when the company is downsizing? Are you trying to force a conversation with someone who isn't ready to listen? When you practice Wu Wei, you don't stop working, you stop straining. You learn to wait for the right moment to act, and when that moment arrives, your actions are precise, effective, and require significantly less energy. You move from a state of stress to a state of flow. By aligning your efforts with the natural timing of things, you find that you can achieve more by doing less, simply because you are no longer fighting the universe. In our current era, we are addicted to the extreme. We celebrate the 100-hour work week or the radical zero-carb diet. We drift toward political polarities and all-or-nothing lifestyle hacks. We have been conditioned to believe that if something is good, then more of it must be better. We view the middle ground not as a place of balance, but as a place of compromise and weakness. Aristotle, the giant of ancient Greek philosophy, argued the exact opposite. He introduced the golden mean, the idea that virtue is always the balance point between two opposing vices, deficiency and excess. To Aristotle, being a good human wasn't about following a rigid set of rules. It was about finding the just right amount of equality. Take courage, for example. If you have too little of it, you are a coward, paralyzed by fear. If you have too much of it, you are reckless, throwing your life away for no reason. Virtue is the narrow ridge between the two. The same applies to every facet of modern life. Generosity is the mean between stinginess and profligacy. Honesty is the mean between brutal tactlessness and deceitful silence. The rule states that excellence is found in the center. In 2026, we have lost this center. We oscillate between extreme indulgence, scrolling for hours and consuming junk, and extreme discipline, where we punish our bodies and minds in the name of optimization. Both ends of the spectrum are equally damaging. Extreme discipline often leads to a brittle spirit that eventually snaps, while extreme indulgence leads to a soft, directionless life. The shift requires a return to intentional moderation. This isn't about being average, it's about being precise. Seeking the middle ground means recognizing that your work is important, but overworking is a vice. It means recognizing that rest is essential, but sloth is a trap. To live by the golden mean, you must constantly audit your habits. Ask yourself, Where am I leaning too far into an extreme? Are you so focused on the future that you've abandoned the present? Are you so disciplined that you've lost your joy? By finding the center, you create a life that is sustainable, resilient, and most importantly, virtuous. In the spiritual landscape of ancient Egypt, the ultimate goal of a human life was to stand in the hall of truth and have one's heart weighed against a single feather. This feather belonged to Maat, the goddess of truth, balance, and cosmic order. If your heart was heavier than the feather, weighted down by deceit, chaos, or unrectified wrongs, you could not pass into the afterlife. While we might view this as ancient mythology, the psychological rule behind it is startlingly relevant for the modern burnout epidemic. The rule of Maat suggests that we must live in moral symmetry. Most of our modern anxiety doesn't actually come from our workload. It comes from cognitive dissonance. We create static in our souls when our internal values do not match our external actions. When you say you value your health, but spend your nights in a cycle of mindless consumption, you create a weight. When you pretend to agree with a colleague just to avoid conflict, while internally seething with disagreement, you create a weight. Every time your mask and your true face move in different directions, your heart grows heavier. The shift is the practice of radical honesty and alignment. Living according to Maat means closing the gap between who you are and who you pretend to be. When your words, thoughts, and actions exist in a straight line, your weight in the world, your gravitas and influence, increases. People can feel the difference between someone who is performing a role and someone who is operating from a place of integrated truth. Practicing this rule involves a constant internal audit. Ask yourself, is my yes actually a yes? Is the life I'm projecting on social media a reflection of my actual reality? When you align your external world with your internal truth, your anxiety naturally decreases. You no longer have to expend energy maintaining a facade or keeping track of half-truths. You become light enough to pass the test of the feather. By choosing integrity over convenience, you stop fighting an internal war and start moving through the world with the power of cosmic order behind you. In our hyper-connected 2026, the concept of unplugging has become a luxury we feel we can't afford. We are tethered to our notifications by invisible digital leashes, convinced that if we look away for even an hour, we will fall behind. We have transitioned from human beings into human doings, measuring our worth solely by our output, our response times, and our visibility. The ancient Hebrew tradition offered a radical countermeasure to this obsession, the Sabbath. While often viewed through a strictly religious lens, the rule of a mandatory day of rest was, and is, deeply biological and psychological. The word Shabbat literally means to cease. It wasn't a suggestion, it was a commandment. The ancients understood a fundamental law of nature that we have tried to ignore. Growth requires a period of non-activity. A field must lie fallow to regain its nutrients. A muscle must rest to grow stronger. By refusing to cease, we aren't becoming more productive, we are simply becoming more hollow. The rule states that if you do not intentionally step out of the race once a week, you are no longer the one running the race is running you. You have become a cog in a machine that has no off switch. Without a period of sacred rest, your mind never leaves the high beta state of alertness and stress, leading to a permanent state of cognitive static that kills creativity and compassion. The shift is the creation of a Sabbath of the mind, a digital free sanctuary. This is not just about sleeping in, it is about a total cessation of striving. For 24 hours, or even just one full waking day, you disconnect from the digital hive mind. No emails, no metrics, no optimizing. When you intentionally stop, you reclaim your sovereignty. You prove to yourself that the world will not stop turning just because you aren't watching it. This practice allows your nervous system to reset, your dopamine receptors to recalibrate, and your perspective to return. You move from the frantic, narrow view of a doer back into the expansive, clear view of a being. You don't rest from your work, you rest so that your work can eventually have meaning again. The final rule is perhaps the most difficult to master, yet it is the ultimate cheat code for psychological resilience. In our modern culture, we are obsessed with comfort and the avoidance of pain. We view obstacles as interruptions to our real life, as errors that shouldn't be happening. We spend an enormous amount of energy wishing things were different, complaining about setbacks, and resenting the bad chapters of our story. This is where the Stoics, and later Friedrich Nietzsche, introduced the concept of amor fati, the love of fate. The rule is simple but staggering. Don't just endure your life. Don't just accept what happens. Love it. Amor fati demands that you view every moment, including the failures, the breakups, the health scares, and the losses, as not only necessary but desirable. It is the realization that your life is a singular, interconnected tapestry. If you were to pull out the threads of your darkest moments, the entire picture of who you are today would unravel. To love your life, you must love the fire that forged you. The shift requires a radical change in your internal dialogue. Most people, when faced with a crisis, immediately ask, "Why is this happening to me?" This is the language of a victim, and it leads to a state of paralysis. The practitioner of amor fati asks a different question. How is this for me? How is this difficult boss training me in patience? How is this financial setback forcing me to become more creative? How is this rejection clearing the path for a better direction? By treating every obstacle as an essential ingredient in your development, you become invincible. When you decide to love everything that happens, you take away the world's power to hurt you. You stop waiting for a perfect life that is free of trouble and start living a great life that uses trouble as fuel. Nietzsche described amor fati as the formula for human greatness. It is the transition from being a passive observer of your fate to being the intentional architect of your character. Everything is fuel. Everything is an opportunity. When you love your fate, you don't just survive the modern world, you thrive because of it.